Well, good morning, everyone. Happy Sabbath to all of you. My name is Jody Melashenko, and you'll know a little bit more about us as the service continues, but we're doing a special segment right now on a mission spotlight. I am grateful that I'm a part of a church family that has not forgotten what the greatest commission is all about, and that's to go into all the world and preach the gospel. Hey, let's face it, here in America, with our land of the free and home of the brave, religious freedom is something we cherish, but in many, many parts of the world, that's not the case. I spent my whole career as a pastor and a teacher. I started off teaching school up at Laurelwood, the old Laurelwood, and pastored here in the Oregon Conference a number of years. My last 14 years of ministry, my wife and I, we organized and led out in the youth evangelism missions for Quiet Hour Ministries. Many of you know Quiet Hour. A few years ago, we decided we didn't quite have the energy we needed to keep that ministry going, so I was able to retire. And the Lord said, nope, retirement's not in my plan. And we have known about and loved the ministry of gospel outreach for many years. And so we signed on as ambassadors with gospel outreach. Now I'm just curious here this morning, how many of you are familiar with the gospel outreach organization out of Walla Walla? Well, that's why we're here. We're going to get the rest of you familiarized with it this morning. Of all the things that Judy and I did in our ministry, we took literally hundreds of kids, high school and college age, on short-term mission trips. We organized projects in about 15 different countries. And I'm going to tell you what, the life-changing experience that a short-term mission trip will have on kids especially, you can't find in church. You can't get it in the schools. They have to experience it. It's just an amazing experience. We were at Milo Academy last night, and they're planning a mission project. If you've got some friends or kids, whatever, that you know that are anxious to go on a mission project, whatever expendable income you've got, support those kids. It's an amazing experience. But let me tell you, focus back on gospel outreach. There's a old television series. Who can tell me the name of the television program back in the years that their final byline when they introduced the show was The Final Frontier? Space. What show was that? Do you remember? Star Trek, yes. All right. Well, for those Star Trek fans, the final frontier was space. Here we go. But as a community of believers, there's another frontier that I look at as being the final frontier. We all know the passage of Scripture in Matthew 24:14. You've probably learned it when you're in cradle roll. This gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in the whole world as a witness unto all nations, and then the end shall come. Lord, all nations? We believe that the final frontier is an area of this world known as the 1040 window. It's one of those terms we've come up with. It's kind of a cute term, but it doesn't really mean anything to anyone unless you know what we're talking about. The 1040 window is a region 10 degrees north latitude to 40 degrees north latitude in the eastern hemisphere. In this region, we have 1/3 of the world's land mass, but yet we have 2/3 of the world's population. It's some of the most highly densely populated areas of the world. In this part of the world, you have the main religions are Muslim, Buddhist, Hinduism, many other religions. In this part of the world, when you're talking about the unreached, 97% of the people who've not heard the gospel live in the 1040 window. That means the rest of the world has heard the gospel, except for a few here and there. 25 years ago, there's a lay pastor from the southern part of the Philippines approached some retired Adventist workers. Some of you know Cecil Roy used to be in this conference for years. A number of these retired laymen approached me and said, is there anything you can do to help sponsor some Bible workers in a much, much needed area in the southern part of the Philippines? And so they talked among their church, and they started sponsoring a Bible worker in the southern Philippines. The first year, I think there was a dozen Bible workers they sponsored. And the results were so amazing that gospel outreach was born. 70 countries in the 1040 window, more than almost 4 billion people. These gospel workers, they are trained. The great thing about gospel outreach is they train and they recruit Bible workers that are indigenous. They know the language, they know the culture, they know the traditions, they know the people, and so they automatically know how to reach these people. Now, I don't want to get sidetracked here, but I am a mission fan. I remember as a kid going to camp meeting. As a junior, primary age, I can remember anxiously awaiting every night in that primary tent to hear Josephine Cunnington Edwards come and tell a mission story. How many of you heard her back in the day? Oh. Or how about Eric B. Hare? Is that a name you remember? And I can still remember, I was probably about 9 years old, and a missionary couple that had a mission on the Amazon River. And boy, when they showed us some of the pictures of those big snakes and the jungle, my heart just really raced. I thought, man, I don't think I could live down there. And Lowell Hallowell from Lazaro Missions, he stood before us in the junior tent, and right there in the middle of that tent, right down the aisle, he pulled out what looked like it was a sleeping bag, and he goes, and unrolls this thing. He says, you know what that is? That's a snake skin that's 22 feet long, and it's an anaconda. Right there, my heart almost stopped, because I knew I couldn't be a missionary because I hate snakes. But I've grown up my whole life knowing that my church believes more than anything in missions. Now, one of the things we've done, and we've changed that philosophy, we don't need to send Americans and Canadians and North American missionaries to areas of the world to make them like Americans. We need to accept the people as they are in their culture and their traditions. What works in those cultures and traditions is a whole lot different than what would happen here in Sutherland. And this is the philosophy of gospel outreach. They recruit and train people in those cultures and traditions. And the results have been just absolutely amazing. One of the ways that they reach people, the Bible workers have been trained to tell the stories of Jesus. Jesus was a storytelling man. I can guarantee you, I can remember stories I've heard in church a whole lot longer than I can remember a sermon. And so these Bible workers have been trained to tell stories. A person has lost a loved one. They tell the story of Lazarus. And it's just an amazing way of reaching the hearts of people. And they're now being baptized by the scores. The Bible workers, I just love this picture. It's probably one of my favorite pictures. Here's a young little Pakistani girl for the very first time hearing the stories of Jesus. Just look at her eyes. Look at her face. What message does that say to you? There's a peace and a love there that she's probably never experienced before. So the Bible workers, they go and they visit in homes of people, very simple homes. Many of them have been trained as medical missionaries. You know, we know that the medical work is the right arm of our gospel. And so they teach people in healthful living. Some of them are nurses and medical personnel. And so the word gets out. And so they set up these clinics, and the people bring their children. You know, unfortunately, many of the diseases and the sicknesses that exist in the 1040 window are the result of very basic health principles that we understand. You know, cleanliness, sunshine, drinking fresh water, you know, those kinds of things. Those are the things that they are instructing these people to understand. And so they set up these medical clinics. We have a number of Bible workers that have been sent to the refugee camps. Now, if you want a taste of poverty and you want a taste of conditions in a human element that is just pretty hard to understand, it's in those refugee camps. These people have nothing. But in this refugee camp here, there's about 6,000 refugees. Already they have a little chapel there where they hold services all day Sabbath. There's about 600 or 700 people that have come that have been baptized. It's just an amazing experience. Now here's another wonderful way that they have been reaching out. And I'm looking in my pocket. Ah, there it is. This young man here, I think this is in Zambia. Or one of the I think this is Ethiopia. I have the same little device that this young man is holding in my hand here. It's called a mega voice, or the talking Bible. And in this little talking Bible has a solar collector here. You don't need batteries. It's been made in such a way that it's waterproof. You can drive a car over it. You can throw this thing. It's almost indestructible. Adventist World Radio is one that came up with this. Whatever language, whatever dialect of your community, they can be downloaded to this. This one has the stories of Jesus, the Sermon on the Mount, the Old and New Testament, Christ object lessons, the great controversy, and then a number of children's stories. So here you have this young man standing in a little, maybe outside of his school, and he's been given this. And he then turns it on and he plays it.
These holy words tell about God and how much He loves all people in the world.
So here we have this little device that can be heard. And so this little boy now stands at his school or at a playground, and now a bunch of children surround him and becomes a little missionary. Amazing. Like I say, Adventist World Radio has produced these. We can get them by the 1,000 for about $30 a piece. Well, can you imagine how that's going to impact some? Now, we're talking about communities where people have nothing. Internet? Are you kidding me? Smartphones? They don't even know what a phone is. So these little devices become like a little magnet. Well, gospel outreach. By the way, they are having a rally 2 weeks from today up in College Place at the Village Church all weekend. If you want to hear more about this incredible organization, most of the gospel outreach staff are retirees. These are people who've served as conference presidents, or they've been in part of the Adventist health system, or teachers. Now here's the incredible part of gospel outreach. They have one paid staff person. The only person that's paid is the one who runs the internet and keeps the website going and all the mail outs. Everyone else is a volunteer. Now, I've worked for several of the church organizations, and I can honestly say that there were times that I was glad that I was part of an organization, that I was getting a salary because my energy was spent and I was still getting a check. But the difference between people who work for organization because they know they have an income coming in versus ones who do it because they have a love for it, it's unbelievable. This is one of the most God-sent organizations in my estimation. And I'm a very simple-minded person. I don't think deep thoughts very much. I just don't have that. But as I look at Matthew 24:14, one of the things that jumps out at me is this. If 97% of the people who have not heard the love of Jesus live in the 1040 window, Jesus will not come back until those people hear. Is that simple enough to understand? Oswald Smith, who was a mission advocate back in the last century, said this, and this one stings. No one has the right to hear the gospel twice, while there remains someone who has not heard it once. 98% of evangelism budgets of funding goes other than the 1040 window. Only 2% of mission giving worldwide goes to the 1040 window. There's enough evangelism taking place today to reach the world dozens of times. Unfortunately, most of it is happening among people who have already heard the gospel. I'm hearing a lot of silence out there because I think some of you are going, you know what? The Apostle Paul put it very clear in Romans. It has always been my ambition to preach the gospel where Christ was not known. And I love these words from the Spirit of Prophecy. Desire of Ages. By giving the gospel to the world, it is our power to hasten our Lord's return. We are not only to look for, but to hasten the coming of the day of God. And as I see it, it's those people there in the 1040 window, that's the last frontier in my simple mind. In the Acts of the Apostles, God's faithful people have always been aggressive missionaries, concentrating their resources to the honor of His name and wisely using their talents in His service. My dear wife, Judy, and I have been in ministry together for 45 years, actually 48. Yes. There's nothing that has had a greater impact on our life than we've stepped out of our comfort zone and done something bold and daring for God. We've been in some areas of the world where, it's tough. But you realize that some of the regions there in the 1040 window, every time one of those Bible workers steps out of the street and goes out to share Jesus, they're putting their life at risk. But as we sit here this morning, I'll just give you a glimpse of how God is opening the eyes and the ears and the hearts of people in the 1040 window. There's a country, I can't tell you where, it would put our Bible workers at risk. But as we sit here this morning, there are 150,000 Seventh-day Adventist Muslims that are worshiping on the Sabbath. They understand all the fundamental beliefs. We don't change their culture. We don't change their traditions. But that's what's happening. And we could tell you about what's going on in India. I met Brother Robinson's brother here this morning. In India alone, when Bob Robertson was there, he made a request to Gospel Outreach. We need 100,000 Bible workers. For every little village, those 100,000 Bible workers, he said in less than a year, they'd probably have 10 million baptisms. So I just want to make an appeal to you. Pray about it with your family and your kids and your grandkids, how you want to be a part of that incredible organization. You see, these Bible workers are just plain, ordinary, simple people, just like you and me. But God takes ordinary people and does extraordinary things for His kingdom. We're going to share a song with you right now that kind of puts it in perspective. One day, a Roman soldier in a shameful gambling game won the blood-stained garment that once had clothed my king. Just a cheap robe of linen, no great value did it hold. But when worn by the master, it was worth more than gold. You see, a few days before, why this old garment had changed the life of a tired and helpless woman who believed with all her might. She reached out and touched it with a hope to be restored. She knew this plain old garment was the vesture of the Lord. God uses common garments to do uncommon things, and God uses common people to live out see, it's what He can make you to be. 'Cause if God can take an old common garment and change a life, then surely He can use you and me. You see, my friends, the fact is this: we are the reason that Jesus came to die, and we have been chosen to send forth His light. Now, it doesn't matter if your worth is great or small. The fact is this: God needs some willing vessels, just common garments, that's all. God uses common garments to do uncommon things, and God uses common people to live out His uncommon dreams. It's not what you are now that matters. You see, it's what He can make you to be. 'Cause if God can take an old common garment and change your life, then surely He can use you and me. 'Cause if God can take an old common garment and change your life, then surely He can use you and me. 'Cause if God can take an old common garment and change your life, then surely He can use you and me. 'Cause if God can take an old common garment and change your life, then surely He can use you and me. 'Cause if God can take an old common garment and change your life, then surely He can use you and me. 'Cause if God can take an old common garment and change your life, then surely He can use you and me. 'Cause if God can take an old common garment and change your life, then surely He can use you and me. 'Cause if God can take an old common garment and change your life, then surely He can use you and me. 'Cause if God can take an old common garment and change your life, then surely He can use you and me. 'Cause if God can take an old common garment and change your life, then surely He can use you and me. 'Cause if God can take an old common garment and change your life, then surely He can use you and me. 'Cause if God can take an old common garment and change your life, then surely He can use you and me. 'Cause if God can take an old co